Welcome to the Attractions Group Podcast. It's episode 91. Alongside Ryan Sir, I'm Don Helbig. Ryan, how you doing?
I'm excited. We get, Top Thrill 2 just opened. Good Gravy opens in a couple days. Lots of good, exciting things going on. But before we move on, let me remind you that you can find us on all your favorite podcast apps, Apple, Google, Spotify. You know the drill. We do a full video version on YouTube that has pictures and images of us and, all sorts of stuff that you'd probably want to pay to see. And follow us on X/Twitter at attractions_GRP. Don, what do we have going on today?
Very excited about this episode. Our special guest here for the third time. And I'd like to introduce Arthur Levine, about theme parks journalist, one of the best theme park journalists out there, if not the best that you're going to find. So Arthur, thanks for joining us to share your experience with Top Thrill 2 at Cedar Point.
It's my pleasure, and thanks for the kind words. That's very, very kind of you. I appreciate it.
So, well, thanks for being here. So, Arthur, what were your initial thoughts when you heard the announcement that Top Thrill 2 was going to be coming, and that it was going to be Zamperla of all companies that was going to renovate this old, Intamin Stratocoaster?
Well, I think, along with the rest of the coaster community, a little befuddled. It wasn't really in Zamperla's wheelhouse to be doing a project like this. However, as I'm sure you guys know, they've really been ramping up their coaster division over the past few years, and were angling, I think, for a project like this to kind of show off their capabilities. And so I was maybe a bit skeptical, but also optimistic and hopeful about what it is that they might be able to do. And as I think we're going to find out in a few moments, what they've done is pretty extraordinary. And they've got, I believe, a real winner with Top Thrill 2.
Arthur, going into this project, who do you think had the most at stake? Was it Cedar Point or was it Zamperla?
I think both. I think they both took a gamble kind of on each other. Certainly Cedar Point took a bit of a gamble on Zamperla on delivering a major project like this. And Zamperla, I think, really kind of, had to step up to the plate to deliver. And it's one thing to say that you want to ramp up your coaster division and build some high profile projects. It's another thing to tackle the third tallest, fastest coaster in the world as that sort of introductory project. So I think they both had a real lot at stake here. You have to remember, guys, putting this in context, when Top Thrill Dragster debuted in 2003, it was the world's fastest, tallest coaster. And when it closed a few years ago, it still was in that number 3 position for the tallest, fastest coaster. And going over the causeway and heading over to Cedar Point and looking at the skyline there, it was kind of painfully obvious that it was standing but not operating. That gigantic top hat tower just kind of sitting there. This is a major event in the roller coaster community and the theme park, amusement park community, and it's just an enormous project, I think, for both Cedar Point and Zamperla.
Yeah, that question was submitted as a listener question a couple months ago, and we've been kicking it around for a long time. But I think you kind of settled on the median where both of them had a lot at stake. But
yeah,
they upgraded they changed the experience. I don't want to use the term upgrade because I haven't written it yet, but it sounds like you might use that term. But they changed the experience so it is longer. You have 3 launches as opposed to 1. How does this change affect the experience of actually riding the ride from a rider standpoint?
I think it completely changes the experience. There's downsides and upsides. I mean, the downside is folks can no longer experience that insane 0 to 120 mile per hour launch that Top Thrill Dragster delivered. And so that, that I think a lot of folks are going to miss that. And I think that kind of played into some of the skepticism that coaster fans had when the announcement was made about what exactly Top Thrill 2 was going to be all about. But it's more than made up, I think, with the upside. And the upside is it really is a completely different experience. I sort of liken Top Thrill Dragster to kind of a wham bam, thank you, ma'am kind of experience. I mean, you launched, you went over that top hat and you hit the brakes in no time flat, and you barely had a chance to think about what happened. And the whole thing was over. Granted, it was an incredibly exhilarating and wild launch, but it was over so quickly that, like I said, you barely had a chance to process it. Now you have much more of kind of a full coaster experience. I think the ride time is about tripled now, and it kind of comes in 3 acts. And I think folks are familiar with those 3 acts. There's the initial launch, where you are launched at 74 miles per hour. You go about halfway up the top hat, stall out, and you fall back down. And that's Act 1. But it's Act 2 and Act 3 where the madness kind of really ensues here. Falling back down and going backwards, you go through the LSM motors a second time, and then it accelerates to 101 miles per hour. And I got to tell you, going backwards at 101 miles per hour, when those LSM motors kick in, oh my God, it was just wild. And even though I knew it was coming, even though I saw trainloads of passengers before me experience this, actually being on the coaster and feeling that was quite a wild experience. And then launching up the new spike tower in reverse and hanging there at about the 350-foot mark, just momentarily hanging there, that was unlike anything I've ever experienced before as well. It's so high that you're actually above the power tower, which I believe is 300 feet tall. And so that really puts this thing in context. And it seems absurd. I mean, how can you possibly be that high? And I got to tell you, the airtime on that initial launch is pretty wild. The airtime on the reverse spike is incredibly wild, but it's nothing like the airtime that you experience in the third act of Top Thrill 2, which is it stalls out on the reverse spike. You fall back down. When you reach the bottom, you're probably going around 100 miles an hour. Then you hit for a third time the LSM motors, which accelerates to 120 miles an hour, and you go up and over the top hat. And I've got to say, I had ridden Top Thrill Dragster, and in my memory, to my mind, it's been a few years, but it seems like you hit the top of that top hat with much more force. I mean, supposedly they were both 120 miles an hour, but there's something different about this 120 miles an hour, because man, oh man, you just really slam into it up there. And as far as the experience goes, this is where I knock it just a bit. I take a few tenths of a point off from my rating, because you hit that top hat with such force that I was really knocked around like crazy. It was a bit rough up there when it makes the 90-degree turn to go over the top hat, and then the 270-degree turn down the other side of the top hat to go down. It's kind of rough, and I don't know that I necessarily fault Zamperla. I'm wondering whether it's possible to build anything and have you approach it at 120 miles an hour and not. I think it's impossible to make that a smooth transition. I'm not sure about that, but I'm just kind of guessing. And then of course you go down the top hat, hit the brakes, and the ride is over. But Ryan, in terms of your question about, what's the experience like, it's totally different. To me, this is a much more complete experience. Adam Sandy from Zamperla, when I interviewed him, likened it to a symphony with different acts, different movements. And I thought that was a really apt analogy. This is like a great piece of symphonic music whereas before, Top Thrill Dragster was kind of like a heavy metal piece of, turn the amps up to 11 and take off and that's it. This has highs and lows and anticipation and different acts, different things to experience. So overall, I think when you take those 3 acts, the experience of Top Thrill 2, even though you do lose that 0 to 120 mile per hour launch, the net result is that it is a better ride, in my estimation.
And Arthur, I would have to say, based on the videos that I've seen, it is definitely, going over the top hat at a faster speed than it did before. But let's talk about one of the issues with the original Top Thrill Dragster. A lot of downtime, part of it related to the hydraulic launch system that it used. This one has a magnetic launch system. So do you think this change over time is going to improve the coaster's long-term maintenance and operational efficiency?
I think that's the plan. I think that's the whole intention here. It's not just Top Thrill Dragster, but other Intamin accelerator coasters that use the hydraulic launch system. It's no secret that there have been issues with King Dakar and with Accelerator out at Knott's Berry Farm and other similar coasters. So yes, on the other hand, you don't hear too many issues about LSM motor systems having those kinds of issues. So I do believe time will tell, of course, and we have to kind of wait and see what it's like when this coaster opens and it's field tested, and over time we'll get a sense of its durability. But I do think that it will be much more reliable. At least that is the hope. And of course, the downside, I guess, of the LSM motors is that apparently they're not capable of launching from 0 to 120 miles per hour. I don't know what the maximum speed is. I mean, this goes from 0 to 74. Can it go faster? I'm not sure. But it would seem to me that it's probably not capable of going as fast as Top Thrill Dragster did. So, that's kind of the downside. The upside is hopefully it'll be much more reliable.
No, Arthur, you kind of mentioned in a lot of your pieces that there was a racing theme and kind of sleeker trains and stuff like that. So I've seen a lot of pictures of it, and it looks really cool. How do you think that this contributes to the overall look and feel of the coaster from a theming standpoint?
Yeah, it's not just the train itself or the track. They've got a different color scheme on the track, where the main track is gray to kind of represent the asphalt of a racetrack, and then there's the white and red alternating track on the towers that kind of look like the bank curves on a racetrack. But it's also the signage and the landscaping. They have some really cool new signage, and this kind of almost a futuristic look, I would say, or a near future look to this. So it's got that racing theme, but it's also got kind of a bit of I was going to say Jetsons. It's not really the Jetsons, which is kind of retro futuristic. This is kind of futuristic. That I think gives it a really cool vibe. I think people are going to enjoy when they head over to what they're now calling the CP Racing Paddock, I believe. And the good news is, I think you're showing it right now, that the viewing stands are still there, so people are going to have a front row seat to the action. And it used to be that people would sit in those bleachers, and they got to see the train take off right in front of them and launch from 0 to 120. Now they're going to get to see it, do all three of its permutations with those front row seats. So I think it's maybe almost as much fun to watch as it is to ride. Almost.
Right, Arthur, you'd mentioned experiencing some intense moments
Yep.
during the ride, particularly when you're facing backwards and going over the top hat. Can you describe how these moments felt and how they compared to what your expectations were going into it before your first ride?
Yeah. I expected it to be a great coaster. I've got to say that, based on everything that I had read and everything that I had seen. But until you actually experience it, it's really difficult to, whether you watch videos or hear me talk about it, until you actually get on that train and experience it, you'll never really get a true sense of it, I believe. And after actually having ridden it a few times, it's just wild. And I got to say, I said this in the first paragraph of my review, that I've ridden coasters all over the country and around the world, for that matter, and I've been on some pretty crazy ones. And I had been on Top Thrill Dragster, I've been on King Dakar, I've been on some crazy rides, but and I don't generally get too rattled. But I was really kind of shook up after riding this, in a good way, I would say. I actually got off and was sort of a little weak-kneed and shaking a little bit, because it is just so intense, especially at the top of the top hat. Going through those elements, those turns, at such high velocity with such force, especially after having experienced, these three crazy launches. It's kind of a lot for me to handle, I guess. And I was a little shook up. I'm not maybe a little embarrassed to admit.
Now, Arthur, you mentioned that the new Zamperla trains made you feel very exposed, nay, say vulnerable, which I think that everybody who's ridden a roller coaster, especially a modern one where it's not designed to box you in, kind of knows what you're talking about. Can you talk about the new trains, how they felt, and how that affected the experience on Top Thrill 2?
Yeah, you do feel quite exposed. The low slung sides, and there's a single restraint, which seems kind of crazy for what this coaster does. The restraint is over the shoulder, in the sense that you take it down over your shoulder, but it really is a lap bar. It rests on your lap, and that's it. That's all you got, is this lap bar. But the restraint is quite substantial. It's hydraulically powered, I believe, and you really feel like you're strapped in, and you're not going anywhere, thank goodness, because, as I said, flailing around at the 420 foot mark was just was just crazy, and thank goodness that the restraint felt as secure as it did. So it's a wildly intense experience, I guess, is the best way for me to say it. And that sense of openness and vulnerability, because of the train, just adds to the intensity.
So, Arthur, with the redesign, the enhancements of Top Thrill 2, do you think Cedar Point is setting a new standard for roller coaster innovation and excitement? Because it seems, based on reading your article, hearing you talk here on the podcast, and what other individuals who have experienced it have told me, it seems like anybody else opening up any other kind of ride, it's going to kind of feel like a carousel compared to this.
Well, certainly Cedar Point has a history of doing this, right? And it's funny you mentioned, or it's funny that you talk about innovation and Cedar Point. First of all, to answer your question, yes, absolutely. I think they're setting a crazy bar here that others are gonna want to try to match, I guess. But thinking back to Magnum XL 200, which debuted in 1989, that was the first coaster to go over 200 feet, and it hit 72 miles per hour, which I believe at the time, I mean, based on physics, I would imagine this must be the case. It was the fastest. It was the tallest coaster in the world. It must have been the fastest as well. And it seemed crazy going on that, all those years ago. Putting it in context of the coasters of the day, it just seemed insane and just wildly intense. Now, the first launch on Top Thrill 2 is 74 miles an hour. It goes about halfway up the tower. So it's going up about 200 feet, I'm guessing, 210, 220 feet. I don't know, something like that. And I know this sounds really weird to say, but that seemed like a piece of cake. That first launch, it felt great, and I really loved it, and it felt somewhat intense, but it felt quite manageable. And so yes, I think after riding that and then going on Magnum, it'll be like, this is nothing. So yes, I think that they have set a new standard. I think that Zamperla shares as a partner in this with setting that standard as well. I don't know what this will mean for them, but I think that they have at this point quite a legacy to live up to, having redesigned and built Top Thrill 2.
Yeah, that's quite big shoes to fill when they're your own shoes. I'll tell you that much. But
right.
So one of the things that almost kind of clouded the opening of this ride was they kind of made a late announcement about the locker situation. No loose articles. Yeah, the lockers, you have to pay for them and stuff. How do you think that this will actually affect the ride experience? Do you think that people are going to see it as it's almost like an upcharge thing, or do you think this is going to be the new normal? Like, what direction do you think things are going to go from here?
Well, I think that there are two pieces to that. First of all, who knows what it's really going to be like until the park is open and it's regular ride operations, and we'll have to see what the Cedar Point team does handling the front of the line and handling the lockers and so forth. But I think there's two pieces to it. One is that folks are just prevented from taking anything onto the coaster, and this is not unprecedented. Other parks do this. Islands of Adventure at Universal Orlando with the Hulk coaster, for example, you can't take anything on. And in both cases, both at the Incredible Hulk and here at Top Thrill 2, you're not on the honor system. You have to go through a detector, and if you have anything on you, they're going to send you right back to the locker. So that's the first piece, that the hassle of having to remove everything and go to the locker and put your stuff in. What's different about what Universal does compared to Cedar Point is that Universal has complimentary lockers. Here, Cedar Point is charging for them. I think it's important to point out that the fee is quite nominal. I don't remember exactly what it is, but we're talking about a few dollars, $2 or $3, something like that. It's not a heck of a lot of money. But I guess it's more the point. People are going to feel like, this is a policy that Cedar Point is enforcing. And in order to comply with it, you have to pay, unless you have folks in your party who are not going to ride, and you can leave all your stuff with them. So, I think that at least initially there's going to be some confusion, I think, at the front of the line. There's going to be a settling in period. I think eventually folks are going to get the message and realize that this is the way things are. And I understand why they have this rule. As I've been saying all along, the forces on this thing are nuts. If I had a cell phone in my pocket, it would definitely go flying and probably conk somebody in the head, and nobody wants that to happen. So in the interest of safety, I understand the policy. But as for the charge part of it, even though it's a nominal fee, I think there's going to be a little bit of grumbling, but I think over time people are going to realize that this is just the way it is.
I think one of the things I've heard from a lot of, fans of Cedar Point is that they fear that they're going to, do it here on Top Thrill 2, and then they're going to say, well, let's try this now on Millennium Force. And then, hey, why not do it on, Maverick? So I think they see it as maybe a trend of things to come. I don't know, but I do understand, like you said, safety comes first with the forces. It's certainly going to come flying out of your pockets. Even if you have the Velcro, as fast as that's going, I mean, it could definitely force that Velcro to come up. So I understand why they're doing it. I think it's just that when you have another ride, Steel Vengeance, where it is free, and then you're, charging for this one, I just think it's kind of a mixed message there.
I think Cedar Point, they've been doing this a long, long time. And if there is an outcry, and if in their surveys they get a lot of negative feedback, they're probably going to make changes to the policy. They're not going to, I think they're going to respect their guests and listen to the audience, and if necessary, make changes. That would be my guess as to what might happen if there is this major outcry.
Arthur, so the next question that's going to be on everybody's mind that they haven't thought about yet, but I can see into the future, is Kingda Ka. Kingda Ka had all the similar problems that Top Thrill did, as far as like downtime and stuff is concerned.
Yep.
Do you see this as the future of Kingda Ka, or do you think that they're going to have to do something different because Top Thrill's already done it?
It's a good question. Of course, we are now talking about a new world in which Six Flags and the Cedar Fair parks are one company. So it's not like, Six Flags would be poaching Cedar Fair's idea. Do I think it's going to happen? I think they're going to want to wait and see what this year of operations looks like for Top Thrill 2, but I certainly could see this in the future. I know a lot of people were upset when Top Thrill 2 closed, and I know some folks were upset and skeptical, as we talked about earlier, when the announcement was made as to what Top Thrill 2 would be, and that 0 to 120 mile per hour launch would be not part of the new coaster. It's one thing to have to lose that and feel badly about that, but you have to weigh that against the downtime. What's the sense of having this wonderful experience if there's a good chance that when you visit the park, you're not going to be able to get on the coaster? So in the interest of uptime and reliability, I think this is a great way to make changes to a ride like Kingda Ka as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if it happens. Am I going to look in the crystal ball and say it's definitely going to happen? I won't say that, but I would certainly say it's in the realm of possibility.
Now, Arthur, last summer in August, when they announced the reimagining of Top Thrill Dragster, and it was going to be Top Thrill 2, everyone kind of assumed that has to be a placeholder name. There was a lot of people not happy with that. But as time has gone on, some have warmed up to it. So what was your thought on that name when it was first announced? And, now after you've experienced it, you've seen the signage and everything around it, what's your thoughts now on the name?
I'll be honest, I thought it was kind of lame when they announced it. I don't know that my opinion has changed too much now that it's open or almost open. It's not the most original creative name in the world, that's for sure. It's funny because Cedar Fair has gone to great lengths to develop this CP racing theme. And it seems like they could have done more with that, maybe played off of that and incorporated that into the name somehow, because they've done a nice job with this CP racing and the racing paddock and all of these different racing elements. I guess they wanted to pay homage to the original coaster. It's so iconic. And they wanted to let people know, I guess, I mean, I'm just sort of trying to put myself in the mindset of Cedar Point and Cedar Fair when they made these decisions. They wanted folks to know that this, has elements of Top Thrill, but that it's different, so it's Top Thrill 2. I mean, I guess that's sort of the idea. But I think they could have maybe sat at the conference table a little longer and kicked around a few more names and maybe come up with something better.
Yeah, I wasn't, super excited about the name. I didn't mind it, but I thought, okay, that's what they've got for this right now. But as time went on, and the ride was, all the different construction updates and that Cedar Point was doing, and then you start seeing it testing and that, several months later, it kind of grew on me. So right now, I mean, I don't mind it.
Well, Don, I think in the grand scheme of things, who really cares about the name?
Right.
It's an incredible ride. It's an incredible ride experience, and that's what matters. You can call it, Wicked Big Coaster, and I'd be happy with that if that's the ride that I'm going to get. So, in the end, I guess the name isn't really all that big of a deal.
Yeah, I'm still not a huge fan of the name. I love the logo. I love everything else about it. I think the name is lame. But let's be honest, they named it what everybody was going to call it anyway. Mm-hmm. So I maybe that was just an act of surrender. So Arthur, moving on from Top Thrill 2. So now we got Cedar Point, which is the self-proclaimed roller coaster capital of the world. And I would say arguably that's probably true by most accounts. They've got Top Thrill back open. They've got an RMC, they got a dive coaster. If they came to you and said, what are like 3 coaster types that you think would help round out our lineup for our next attraction? Top of your head, where would you recommend? Where would you recommend going?
I don't know that I could come up with 3, but one thing that I think Cedar Point is missing is a great dark ride. And there has been so much activity lately with parks that are developing wonderful so-called storytelling coasters that are true thrilling coasters, but that have storytelling elements. And I'd love to see Cedar Point do something like that. There aren't many regional parks that do that, and that would be, I think, a great addition to the park, to have some kind of a storytelling coaster. So that would be my suggestion.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'd be on board with that. Arthur, as you were attending Media Day and you got your rides in, others are riding it. What was kind of the conversation that everybody was having during Media Day about Top Thrill 2?
I think in general, everybody was over the moon about it. Everybody loved it. You've read the reviews, you've seen the comments online. Virtually everybody is saying, including me, that this surpasses the original, and that's really saying something. So if that's any indication, I think when this opens to the public, I think that will be the public sentiment. That's my guess. We all really enjoyed it and couldn't wait to get back in line and get back on it. And I think that is going to be the way that people are going to feel about this once they get to visit Cedar Point and get to ride it.
Arthur, so you've ridden Top Thrill 2, clearly very impressed. Is it your number 1 coaster at Cedar Point now? Or if not, what is it?
That's a good question, Ryan. I'd have to mull that one over. I really like Steel Vengeance, and they're really 2 different animals. It almost seems unfair to compare the 2. That's certainly the 1, 2, and I don't know the order necessarily, but that would be my first and second pick. I really like Maverick as well, but I think the other 2 coasters would take the number 1 and number 2 position. I don't know. Right now, that would be hard for me to say. As much as I say that Top Thrill 2 is now a much more fuller coaster experience, certainly compared to Top Thrill Dragster, it still is somewhat of a, I guess I'd call it a novelty ride, maybe, or a gimmick coaster. The gimmick is this is one of the tallest, fastest coasters in the world, whereas Steel Vengeance is more of a really complete, full coaster experience that is just, I mean, it's just sheer artistry what they've done with that. So probably Steel Vengeance, I'd say would be the number one. But man, oh man, Top Thrill 2 is right up there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Arthur, you've been on attractions all over the place, and there's a lot to always get excited about. In as many attractions you've experienced, and sometimes it might be hard to get excited about some of the rides that are opening. But for you, when you think about your first ride on Top Thrill 2, can you come up with a ride that maybe you had that same kind of feeling about? Like, when was the last time you felt that way about a ride?
I got to say, Don, I've been doing this a long, long time, but as hard as this may be to believe for folks that are looking at me and looking at the lack of hair and what hair is there is gray and the wrinkles and everything else, I'm an old dude, but whenever I go to a park, whether it's for a new attraction or even just to revisit a park that I love, I kind of approach it with wide-eyed anticipation and sort of with childlike wonder almost. And I know that sounds crazy, but I love virtually all parks and look forward to all attractions. Certainly, this was a very special event, and Top Thrill 2 is a very special coaster, and occupies a very special place in the world of coasters. Can I compare it to anything else? I mean, certainly Top Thrill Dragster, the first time I rode that was pretty nuts. And King Dakar, I mean, these extreme forces, like I said, at one time, Magnum was state of the art. And now, you said this earlier, Don, it's kind of like a carousel ride. It's like, that's nothing. So constantly raising the bar as parks are doing and as ride manufacturers are doing, that just makes for a wonderful new crazy experience, and this was certainly one of the craziest I've ever experienced.
So Arthur, in your outsider's opinion, what's next for Zamperla after this, assuming it's successful, which it looks like it will be?
It's a good question. I think that they've proven to themselves, and again, we need to give it a little bit of time and see how it actually does this season. But I think they've proven to themselves and proven to the world that they're capable of doing some pretty extraordinary things. So, they've set their own bar pretty high, and I wouldn't be surprised if they go after something like King Dakar, or pitch this to maybe the Middle East or the Far East. Who knows? We may be seeing some really crazy coasters coming out of Zamperla based on the success of Top Thrill 2.
Arthur, you had Zamperla representatives there at the Media Day event.
Mm-hmm.
As they're observing everybody riding Top Thrill 2, what was kind of like their reaction to seeing how everybody enjoyed it?
I think they were pretty pleased. Antonio Zamperla himself was there, and in his inimitable European Italian way, he said to me, we filled this coaster with Italian emotion. And I don't know what that means exactly, but when he said it, it sounded very lyrical and it sounded great. And it certainly seemed like he was thrilled to be saying it and thrilled to be seeing the reaction of everybody there that day.
Now, Arthur, did you get to experience the coaster, the next new coaster right down the road at Dorney Park? Iron Menace. Did you get to experience that?
No, I have not been on Iron Menace yet, but I've certainly been on many dive coasters, so I've been on similar rides.
Well, regardless, I mean, if you've done a dive coaster, you kind of have the feel for it. It's not, reinventing the wheel the way that Top Thrill 2 was.
Right.
What are your thoughts on Iron Menace, at least from like a theme standpoint? That's one thing that's been discussed quite a bit by us and our followers.
Yeah, I was just saying earlier that I'd like to see parks like Cedar Point, I was saying incorporate some storytelling elements into a coaster, and I was thinking more along the lines of, having maybe some indoor dock ride elements and even some animatronics. Who knows? You don't get that with Iron Menace, but you do get a pretty well thought out storyline that is targeted to the region and speaks to the people of who live in that area, and I think that's great. I hope that they're setting a precedent for other parks to incorporate more storytelling into their attractions and coasters, and I think we just may see that.
Arthur, big year at Cedar Point. Top Thrill 2, obviously the star attraction, but you have some other coasters that have been there for a long time, celebrating, anniversary seasons. You've got, Raptor, turns 30, Blue Streak, 60 years old. So I kind of feel a little bit sorry for those rides because it's, should be years that are, celebrated for them because of the anniversaries. But it's kind of lost in the shuffle a little bit, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's going to happen when you've got a coaster lineup like Cedar Point does. The anniversaries are going to tick off, and the park keeps innovating and introducing new things. And unfortunately, that's going to happen. It's incredible how many coasters they have, and as I'm sure you can relate, driving over the causeway and seeing that crazy array, that skyline, which is all new now with the 420-foot reverse spike. They've added yet another highlight to the skyline there. But coming over that causeway and seeing it makes me giddy. I'm sure you guys feel the same way. It's so concentrated, and it just there's it just fills me with joy to approach the park and to see those incredible thrill machines and to see that skyline, that iconic skyline. It's wonderful.
Yeah, no other park has an entry into the parking lot like Cedar Point when you come over that causeway.
Right. Agreed.
So Arthur, we probably should have hit this at the top of the show, but you clearly are very versed in this stuff. If people want to know more about your opinions, your observations, stuff like that, where can they find your articles?
So I am on Substack, and people can find my writings at About Theme Parks. That's ABOUT themeparks.fun, Fun. And when they go there, they can sign up for my newsletter, and then twice a week in their inbox, they will get my stories, my articles. It's a different kind of a different kind of a model. We talked about this before when I was on with you. Instead of playing search engine optimization silly games and trying to get as many page views as possible, or instead of trying to sell ads, there are no ads on the site. All I'm trying to do is to assemble a community of folks who love roller coasters, who love theme parks, who love amusement parks, who love attractions, and write to them, and without having to worry about having to please the Google gods or anything like that. So go to aboutthemeparks.fun and sign up for my newsletter. There are free and paid options. And love to have more folks join the community.
I can say if you're a fan of the amusement industry, Arthur is a must read.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate that.
Well, Arthur, I appreciate you being a three-peat on our show. It's really always an honor to have you on, and thanks for sharing your insight about Top Thrill 2.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on. It's always fun to talk about what's happening in the industry with you guys. You obviously know your stuff, and it's a lot of fun to talk about anything, let alone something as eventful and impactful as Top Thrill 2. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And once again, that's aboutthemeparks.fun. You got one of those neat new URLs where you can, .fun, .tv, all that stuff. But aboutthemeparks.fun. I actually, I go there. I have your newsletter, but I go to your website pretty often when we do like our pick six and stuff like that. You're a really good source for that sort of stuff. But I'll leave a link in the description of both the YouTube video and the podcast for Arthur's About Theme Parks. Well, just the website is aboutthemeparks.fun, but it's Arthur's About Theme Parks. But thank you once again, Arthur. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.